All right. Week one preview for semifinals. Patrick is going to be joining me here in a minute, I believe. He's drove up to Chicago today and checking into a hotel for some Army work. His Army responsibilities have been picking up. He's got a couple days of work to do there in Chicago before heading out to Korea. I doubt that there's very many people from the U.S. that are traveling over to Busan for the Asia semifinal, but Patrick has been working closely with Sahar Kaya for a while now, and actually has taken quite an interest in the Asian CrossFit community overall. Another guy who's been taking an interest in the CrossFit Asia CrossFit community and just generally in supporting all the athletes out there is Mike Halpin. He's been rolling out a pretty cool thing that he's doing on his Instagram. Wonder if I can pull that up actually. Obviously, I'm on this by myself right now, which I don't do too often, but thankfully Chad and Patrick have taught me a little bit about how I can do this. Here, let's see about this. So he's been doing this series. They're posted on stories where you can see, it's got a lot of stories. I know when I open someone like this and they have a million stories, I don't always look at it, but he's reached out to athletes all around the world and encouraged people who know the athletes to send out some information. He's planning on doing this for all of the athletes everywhere in all the semifinals. And so here's some of the athletes he's doing the women in Asia first, and he's got a plan to do the men in Asia tomorrow, and then continue on with the women and men in I think Patrick's just logged in. I got a beep in my ear. In Europe. So this is a really great thing that he's doing. As far as I know, there's really nobody else other than me who's ever taken an initiative to actually highlight every single athlete that makes it to this stage of competition. And absolutely, I have not done it to the caliber that he's doing it. He even shares here at some point, there's his plan, that that he has, this is like something that's motivating him. Is that people are sending him some information. Oh no, is this one? That's what it is. This person, athlete from Iran, and her coach reached out to him. And anyway, Halpin's a great follow, and he's doing some really cool things to promote the athletes all over the semifinal platform this year. And we're gonna basically go week by week and look at the semifinals that are actually happening, which is what he's doing as well. So a great supplement to follow with what we're doing, and a really commendable thing that I think he's doing for the athletes. PC,
What's up?
you made it. I started
Can you hear
without
me?
you. So yeah, I got you.
No. I'm making some changes here. Keep on talking. You're doing good.
One of the before we get to the athletes in the first week of semifinals, there's a topic that's been going on. That's been, I would say, a hot topic of conversation recently, and it has to do with CrossFit Games allocations. I have more or less refrained from making any comments about that. I know that, there have been people who have been publicly talking about it for most of this season and even prior to the season starting. And in particular, that would be Chase and Bill and Mike Halpin on the Get With The Programming platform, where they've kind of rolled out their own system as I don't think that they're necessarily suggesting it's the optimal system for doing it. It's just a different way of doing it. And they're focusing on the season that's actually happening. And I think that the main strength of that system is that those are the athletes who are actually competing this year. I think all that information is valuable, but I also think that it's kind of half of the picture. If you have been following the work that I've been doing for 5-6 years now, since Sevan first really gave me a public platform back in 2018, I've spoken about this topic a lot. And usually when I speak about it, it's on the back of research and some studying that I've done. And if you're just looking at Any idea why CrossFit YouTube has Oceana's Friday up and no one else? Oh, okay, well. Anyway, when you look at the season, there's 4 stages of the season. That's been going on for 4 years now, or this is the 4th year, and half of those stages are online, and half of those stages are live competition. 3 of those 4 stages of the season are good data points in terms of comparison from a global perspective. Obviously, the Open and the quarterfinals, every athlete's doing the same workouts at the same time of the year. There's, of course, there's the unknown about if whether an athlete did it for the first time and only time, or if they redid it several times. And so there's some variables there that are difficult to comprehend. You can fast forward to the games. The games is clearly the best opportunity for us to see the athletes who made it there that year by whatever means was available to them to compete in an isolated setting, uniform, controlled, whatever. Then there's the semifinals, and the semifinals is tough because the first year some were online, some were online, some were live. They were all programmed independently, so there was no real way to compare athletes. The next year, they were all live, but it was like partially programmed by CrossFit, partially programmed by the competition, and there was still some variability within the ordering of events. And again, you can't really draw a comparison that's meaningful for what this topic of conversation. Last year, CrossFit programmed all the events, so you might think, okay, finally we have something that we can use as a means to compare the athletes, and it gave us the vibes of the cross-regional leaderboards from back in the day, the middle 2010 years. And but of course, we know that some of those workouts, specifically the first one, were still largely different semifinal to semifinal based on the floor. And so basically that's to say that the semifinal is not a great live competition to use when you're evaluating global performance against each other. So for me, I like to use the games. Before I show you this next screen, basically, there's an obvious caveat, which is that different regions have different opportunities in terms of the number of athletes to compete there. So we can even back it further if we want to do and talk about why this worldwide ranking system and the distribution method is probably less than optimal. We can, and we obviously are going to get to the fact that the changes that they've made this year are frustrating because they happened so late. We thought that the system was going to be just a total rollover. It wasn't. The nuance change to it that made some changes to the spots distribution. Do you hear that, Patrick? That
Might be.
I wonder if
Hold
it.
on a second. I connected.
Yeah, just
Sorry, I'm disconnecting my AirPods.
okay. No, Zombie, you're not going to be upset with this list. So basically what I'm about to show you is, Patrick, do you have this document that I shared with you today, Regional Games Distribution? You're muted now. I can share it, I think. How do I do this? Present. I'm not sure how to share this, Patrick. Do you have it? You're still muted. Okay, thank you for removing that. Now I can probably do it. Here it is. Okay, so we're going to look at the men first. I think you guys should be able to see that now. Let me zoom in a little bit. And I know it's a lot of numbers on the screen, but basically at the very top column, you see spots. These are the games allocation spots that we currently have for this year, 20, 10, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The 20 is obviously combined of East and West. And that's what I'm doing here is I'm combining the East and the West for North America. And then basically by year, so the slashes are the years. The first one is 2021, the second is 2022, and then 2023. Actually, I think it's left to right, 23, 22, 21. So as you go to the right, it gets older in that regard. And you can see that each year, North America men have had 6 out of the top 10. They've had an average of 7 out of the next 10. And then they've had, they have a lot of athletes, so they have about 4, about 5 in the 21 to 30 range, and the least number of them in the 31 to 40 range. As I said, because they get, twice so many spots as Europe, it looks very different, where they have, basically twice as many guys in the top 10, but that's direct correlation of the number of spots that they get. And I didn't break it down to podium spots, but basically Europe's not getting any podium spots during this time, whereas North America is getting a majority of them outside of Ricky. So I looked at the percentages, and the percentages are down below. And obviously, if you slide over to the right, you can see some, rather striking things, which is, so these 50% in South America, that's Guimaeros. Outside of Guimaeros, there's not a single athlete in the last 3 years from South America, Asia, or Africa that's finished inside the top 10 or the top 20 at the games. Asia has had one finisher on the male side that's even inside the top 30. The rest of them are out of the top, or they're in the bottom 10. Africa similarly had one that was Jason Smith in 2021 that was inside in between 21 and 30th, and then they've been they didn't have a representative last year because he failed a drug test, and their other guy was Keelan Henry, who had to withdraw. So this just gives you kind of this picture of how the athletes they actually have available to compete at the games do. Now I basically the summary of this is I don't think that this should be taken in isolation, and I don't think that the system that Chase and Bill and Mike are using should be taken in isolation. I think that a hybrid model of that is what I would lean on if I was in charge of evaluating the game's distribution spots, and that's something that I had come up with a few years ago, and I even try to suggest it to people who might be able to make an impact with CrossFit, but they weren't, obviously they have their own ideas about what's going to work. So when you look at this on the men's side, you start to see some patterns. And basically, if you look at the European men, for example, this cell down here is something that makes note for me, that their distribution of men in the bottom 10 at the games is becoming less and less every year. There is a high density of their athletes that are finishing in this 21 to 30 range. In fact, it's about half of the athletes that represent them the last 2 years. They're losing some percentage here, and there's some volatility here. But basically, the athletes that are making the top 10 over this span are only 3 athletes. It's Jonakoski, BKG, and Lazar Jukic, and then Yellow Hoste sneaks in to 10th last year. So this is what I noticed for Europe is that the men are getting better at the bottom range. And I think that is reflective in the data that Chase and Bill have brought to light through their series this season. And it is why I thought that the European men would actually earn one extra spot this year relative to last year. So I thought they'd have 12 instead of 11. Obviously, they only have 10, and we're going to get to that and talk about who those 10 might be, which is why we're kind of doing this today. This spot is instead going to South America and Oceania. And in South America, like I said, with if you take, Guy's got these 2 data points. Everyone else who's made it hasn't really done much there, but they do have a good showing online. And so, kind of, I'll leave it up to you guys to decide what you put more value in. And again, I think there should be a spread of value. Patrick, has anyone asked any questions about this on the men's side before I look at the women? I don't think so.
No.
Excellent. Perfect. All right. The women's side is actually quite different than the men's. And I think that that's incredibly important for people to realize, because what I've seen people commenting is Europe is incredibly strong or Asia is incredibly weak. And they're making these group statements without acknowledging the fact that the men and the women in those regions are actually quite different, and they always have been. If you go back, I think there's an article on the Morning Chalk Up from 2019 or 20 that I wrote that said, please give the European women more game spots. Back then, the European women had a limited number of spots, and pretty much all of them that were making the games were dominating at the games relative to the North American women, who had a lot more spots and weren't really backing that up. Interestingly enough, if you look at the European women in the top 10 over the last 3 years, 3 years ago, they had 5 athletes in the top 10. So half of their athletes that made it to the game were in the top 10. 9 of the 11 were in the top 20, and all of them were inside the top 30. They've had the same number of spots over all of these 3 years. They get one less spot this year, and people are not that happy about it. But if you look at the trend, they went from having 5 to only 2 the last 2 years, and it's the same 2. It's Laura Horvath and Gabby Magawa. They do have a fairly consistent showing of women that's in this 11 to 20 range, but notably, they went from having nobody in the bottom 10 to having 3 and then 4 last year that were inside the bottom 10. out of only 11. And now you're talking about a third of the athletes over the last 2 seasons from Europe on the women's side that have made the games that are finishing in the bottom 10. And I think that when you factor this data in, it basically offsets the strong online performance. A lot of people would probably take the position that I want athletes at the CrossFit Games who are going to do better in live competition, since that's ultimately what it is. And I'm not that interested in having online specialists at a live competition. And that's part of the reason why I think that these two metrics should be used in unison with each other, to kind of see both ends of the spectrum. As
Because
far as, go ahead, Patrick.
basically what you're doing is you're showing trends in fitness essentially. In these developing countries, these other countries outside of North America and Europe. And that's ultimately what CrossFit wants to do. It's a worldwide sport. They want to keep these regions. They want to represent them. But what you're seeing is in certain areas, in certain countries, they are getting fitter. They are progressing, and you're seeing these unsettling trends. Like if you ask anyone without any prior knowledge of this, but with the basic knowledge of CrossFit, they would say European. I mean, we're seeing in the comments, Europe deserves more spots, but according to the trends, mm, they're not. They're not. Yeah, they're fit, but they're not. Are they the fittest? The top 40 fittest people in the world, but right now, a third of them are finishing in the bottom 10, especially on the women's side.
Augustus Link, 2024 Fitness Auditor. What if you ranked them by their placement at semis versus just overall? It would make sense that North America has a higher percentage in the lower range than Europe, just because so I'm assuming that you are associating yourself with North America, uh, had more people to fall down there. I talked about the semifinals earlier, and basically the fact that it's not a consistent study the way that the open, the quarterfinals, and the games are, and it makes it very challenging, especially if you're trying to have a 2 or 3 year look back, because some were online, some were live, some were programmed by CrossFit, some were, and there's a hybrid year, and then there was, so all of those things kind of factor into making the semifinals, unfortunately, a very difficult stage of the season to do a relevant analysis with this with. Now, there are other ways that you could go about doing it. I mean, if you guys watched the show that we had Barkley Dale on a couple of weeks ago, where we're actually drawing on a database that has hundreds of competitions, thousands, tens of thousands of athletes in it, and we've made a ranking system for showing their performance in those competitions that evaluates it relative to the other people in the competition. That could be another way that you could evaluate it. I would argue that that ranking system is going to be more accurate than the current worldwide ranking system in terms of allocating where the actual density of high performing athletes in live competitions are. It does also account for the open and quarterfinals. Okay. Augustus is saying, well, if I'm saying like you bring in the 12th place semifinal athlete compared to a first place athlete, the 12th place athlete in any semifinal will be worst mostly. No. So the 12th place performer from North America East last year, I think they got 11 women in. I think it was Paige Semenza. Was she the last one in, Patrick? And she
Yes,
beat the top women in
she was
South America. She beat the top woman in Africa, but she beat about the top woman in Asia. And she beat the top woman in Asia, who was Seher Kaya, despite Seher Kaya having the highest ever finish for a woman from Asia. And I have done this before. I have actually said, okay, let's give North America the exact same number of spots as Europe. Let's only take the top 5. And when you compare the top 5 athletes from North America to the top 5 athletes from Europe, on most years, on the men's side, it's every year the top 5 men from North America outperform them. For the women, the top 5 from Europe used to outperform the top 5 from North America. Now it's the top 2 from Europe, Laura and Gabby, are outperforming the top 2 from North America, or it's pretty close. Look, think about Emma Lawson, think about Ariel Lowen, think about Mal O'Brien. It's basically a wash. And but the top 5 are still trending towards North America, as you see on this chart here, where the North American athletes have, these are their top athletes that are finishing in the top 10, whereas Europe has only been able to get 2 into the top 10 in the last couple of years. So this isn't meant to be the focus of the show, but I did think that in the context of all the conversations that people have been having about this, that the nobody that I've seen, and I apologize if there's someone out there that has been talking about it and I haven't seen it, has mentioned the live competition aspect. Everyone seems focused on how well Europe did in the Open and the quarterfinals this year, and they obviously did. But Augustus, absolutely, you're not derailing from the conversation. It's a great question. I don't think that enough people are asking good questions. Um, well, yeah, and you said mostly, and you're excluding these, but they're not. They can't be excluded. They are factored in, and with the decisions that CrossFit has made recently, they are the ones that have taken the spots from Europe and North America East. I think that a lot of people have said this, but I've been saying this for a long time. If I was in charge of this system, every region would be guaranteed one spot, and then there would be a way to distribute your spots that would balance
Mm-hmm.
who is actually competing in that region this year. So, for example, 3 years ago, Tia had an Australian flag by her name. But this year, she's competing as North America. So I would factor her in as a North American athlete for whatever duration of the study we're doing, because that's the region she's competing in now. So even if she was in Oceania last year, she would factor in as an American this year because that's where she's registered. And then I would look at all of the people that are registered in North America this year, and I would evaluate their performance at the games last year. And I'm sticking to only the game season for this because there's a lot of other variables in the off season that CrossFit has intentionally stayed away from, and we haven't. I think we have enough data within the game season to actually do this well. And then I would balance that out with their open and quarterfinals performance. And I would, there's different weighting systems that I've played around with over the years, but these two, the live competition and specifically performance at the games, I believe does give some insight into it. If you got one qualifying spot in your Africa and you're finishing in the top 10 every year, absolutely, that should be relevant. If you have two spots in Asia and you never finishing inside, you have bottom 10 performances year after year after year, that should be relevant. That's not a good indicator of someone who needs an extra spot. Now, but if you think about the women in Asia, they're trending with only two representatives, they're trending in the right direction. They had, they had two every year. They went from having two in the bottom 10 to having two in the middle 10 to having a 1-1 with Sung Young Choi missing the season due to injury. And there are some, variables like that with really small numbers of representation can be difficult to account for. But I do think that adding in the live portion of the competition is extremely valid and has been under discussed by other people who are clearly very passionate about this topic.
Well, you're on record. It's been discussed. And yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of good points, and it's true. I definitely think that's how it should be. But let's get to what we actually are really here for. Unless you
The
want
spot should be
to
given to athletes and not regions. This is a great point actually for a nice transition here. Is ultimately, if you think about here's the thing: there's always an argument to be made for whatever the counter point is. Right now that we just had the Masters or age group online qualifiers, and there's a huge contingency of people that are like, man, it's really tough to have three online qualifier stages of the season. The bad thing about having three online qualifier stages of the season is you don't actually get to test any of the athletes in person. And we know that testing athletes in person is very different than testing them online. It's different than testing them online because there's variables that are out of their control. There's an element of one and done. There's an element of how do you recover. There's an element of what do you do if you don't sleep well? What are you going to do to eat? How, body work, all these other things that you have a massive amount of control with inside your gym that you don't. And then ultimately at the championship event, it's live. The counter to that is, well, the online system is great because then you can do exactly what Aster Serve is suggesting. And in the master system, there's no game spots distributed based on where you live or where you were born. It's just the top 40 or the top 30 or the top 20. Same for the teenagers, same for the adaptive division. I think that the live competition is ultimately far more valuable than online competition. And we do have a system in place where there is an opportunity for the elite individuals and teams to compete in in a live setting. And if we're going to have that, then there needs to be a specific number of spots allocated for the reasons that I mentioned, that semifinals is not a good portion of the season to evaluate across all of the 7 different semifinals. But I appreciate that that point. from Astroserve there, because I think it highlights something else that's important, which is that there's never just one side to the story, and I think it's important to have those conversations. I have to believe that CrossFit is having conversations like that amongst themselves when they're making these decisions. I don't, admittedly, I don't understand sometimes the decisions that end up being made, but I don't think that it's a matter of one person writing down one idea and then nobody asking any questions and they're just running with that idea. So.
Well, last week Brian unveiled his predictions for every semifinal, pretty in depth. He went to just about every semifinal. He went at least pick top 20, top 10, depending on his familiarity with the field. But with Asia and French Throwdown, I think you ranked everyone across the board. At least with French Throwdown, we'll see you in Asia. But yeah, you wrote the article last week. We had Nick Matthew on and Amanda Hari, and we actually went through your picks. And for the most part, we agreed with. I think all three of us we agreed with most of them. But for the next 3 weeks, what we're going to do is every week we'll do a preview of that particular semifinal. So again, if you want to read this article, head over to our bfriendlyfitness.com. It's there. We'll pin it. It's in the chat if you want to click on the link there and follow along. But we'll start with week one, and why not? Let's start with the French Throwdown and week one, and I get to show off my pretty little graphics. So you want to
I'm
do men
looking
or
forward to
women
these.
first? Huh?
Let's start with the men.
Okay, we'll go men. So
I just want to address this real quick. Oh no, I was hoping Sharonke still had a chance. Thanks at Draw Your Dagger. Yeah, David Sharonke did not qualify in the top 40 this year. He's a great example of an athlete who, if he were in the semifinals, you might actually be seeing him on this list right now, because I think these semifinal workouts are phenomenal for him, and he's best for last. That's what I like to say.
yeah.
And but while David Shrunke is an example of an athlete like that, there are examples of athletes like this throughout the history of the CrossFit Games that either didn't make it to regionals or didn't make it to the games. And you and I both know that if they had made it there, they probably would have had a good showing. The best example and the easiest example is Sam Briggs failing the handstand walk in 2013, not having a chance to defend her title. A lot of people think she would have had been a two-time champion if she'd been able to that year, but she didn't, meet the requirements to get there. And ultimately, if you can't get there, then you don't get a chance to show what you can do. And at this point, all of the athletes should know that if you can't pass through the early stages of the season, it doesn't matter how good you are at live competition. So right off the bat, we have a person here who is a great example. Aha, by the way, is a good supporter of ours, and we appreciate it. But this is a good example of what a large majority of what I think the problems are with CrossFit pundits, CrossFit fans, CrossFit enthusiasts, which is that they have extremely short-term memory, and they don't think about things historically. Yonakoski is having an incredibly impressive season. He's one of our friends of the week this week. It's the second time he's been one of our friends of the week. We have been celebrating the fact that he won the Open. We've been celebrating the fact that he had the quarterfinals. We had a conversation about how rare it is that any athlete does that, especially any male athlete. But but if you understand what the CrossFit semifinals are, if you know the type of athlete that Lazar Jukic is and the type of athlete that Yonakoski is, then you would rank these athletes as far as the 1 and 2 go in the same order that I have. And you may even put Yonakoski a little bit lower on the list, because Lazar Jukic has won semifinals multiple years in a row, and he is despite the fact that he's just fit overall, competing in the offseason, podium in Dubai, winning in Madrid. Actually, Madrid's a great case study for this. At the Madrid CrossFit Championships, Lazar Jukic got first place, Yonakoski got second place. Yonakoski beat Lazar Jukic on 5 out of the 7 workouts there. The 2 workouts he lost to Lazar on were the running workout, which Lazar won outright, and the heavy lifting workout. The heavy lifting workout basically came down to the fact that Yonakoski had a poor execution of his second and third round attempt on the lift, and that was enough for Lazar to beat him. And I think it was like a $10,000 or $15,000 difference. I talked to both of them that day. They were both well aware of it, and Yona just said I didn't execute there. This is what happens at semifinals, though, when you're talking about super fit guys and small margins over a small number of events. I will absolutely be picking Yona Koski to finish higher than Lazar Jukic at the CrossFit Games, um, but this is not the CrossFit Games. So we can just look at the workouts. Lazar Jukic is amazing at monostructural workouts. We have one run, we have a double under toe to bar front squat workout that is basically a combination of two workouts that he won in Dubai. We have a bike. He's also incredible at upper body pulling. We have a bike box jump legless rope climb workout. We have a bike uh, ring muscle up and lunging workout. We have a rowing and handstand walk workout, and we have a snatch ladder. There is nothing here that Lazar Jukic is going to struggle with. In fact, there's mostly things here that Lazar Jukic is going to excel at. And I think when he spoke with, I think it was with Peter, Pedro, Coffee Pods and Watts, he kind of said, hopefully by the last workout, I will have kind of a cruising in type of a thing. I understand your points, but I'll happily take the bet for Yona at semifinals. So these are, this is great. People are going to do this, and that's fine. At the end of the day, Lazar Jukic and Yona Koski are not really people that I'm worried about at all this weekend. They're going to qualify for the CrossFit Games, barring something that we don't like to talk about, and they're both going to have great weekends. But I'm not really in the mood to bet with anyone about it. But I feel very, very confident Lazar Jukic is the man to beat in Lyon this weekend. And I will be in Lyon. I'm flying there tomorrow morning. Do a little bit of live content. So this should be just super clear. CrossFit will not allow anybody to stream the competition outside of whatever they're providing from on site. We have maximal interest in telling as many stories about the athletes and the competition as we can, playing within the rules that CrossFit allows for the media team. And so we will be on site. I'll be giving you guys previews each day. I'll be giving you guys some post analysis based on what I'm watching in person, but I'm going to mostly be focusing on the cut line, on the athletes that are trying to make it for the first time, on the athletes who in each individual event need to have something great happen for them. So for a good example, and add to it, Hoffer doesn't make it. So Victor Hoffer, great. We're going to talk about Victor Hoffer in a minute, and he'll be a good example there. What were the rules that HQ stated? Well, when you get approved for a media pass from our CrossFit HQ, they basically send you a contract that you have to sign. There's some specific rules in there. They're very similar to what you would get at a Rogue, a Wadapalooza, many of the more formal offsite events, about the number of pictures, the length of footage that you can post, what you're allowed to sell and not sell, etc. These types of things. It's pretty commonplace at this point. But it definitely does not include live streaming the competition. PC, where should we go next?
Well, so you already talked. Well, there's let's just work down. There's 10 spots in Europe, as we already talked about. So these are your 10 selections. But let's kind of work down. We already talked about Lazar and Yona. They're kind of like heads and above. You're predicting it's going to be a race between those two. Ultimately, Lazar probably walking away with it. And I agree with that, because when it comes to semifinals, the guy he's a gamer. He shows up. And then you go into the next set. I think, again, you have Henrik, BKG, and maybe Hosta all competing for that final podium spot. Or do you agree with that, or do you throw? Is that the next separation of athletes for you?
Yeah, I would say that's where I like, if we're kind of trying lines or tiers here. Yes, I would group that. I would put that group of athletes, kind of group them together. I actually think that there's a scenario where Henrik Hepalainen beats Jonakoski and ends up finishing second like he did last year. Hepalainen is a very underrated athlete, and he has a very similar skill set to Lazar Jukic, who I already went through and explained that I think that this series of tests lines up really well for him. BKG, you never want to count out BKG.
Especially if it's healthy.
Right. At this point in his career, that's really the only question, is how healthy is he? We've mentioned it before. He fell outside the top 10 at the games last year because he didn't do the lifting event, the Olympic total basically, and he still finished 11th with basically taking a zero there. It's kind of similar to Emma Carey taking a zero on the first workout and
Mhm.
still managing to finish well within the top 10. So I don't want to count out BKG for anything really. But he has lost to Lazar at the semifinals for a couple years running now. He was like 7th or 8th last year. I think he'll do better than that this year. I think it'll be a much more smooth run for him because I believe that he's healthy, and when he's healthy, even Lazar and Yona would still say BKG is the king of Europe, and his resume certainly speaks for itself. He's got more podium finishes at the games than everyone else in the entire field of Europe combined. So yeah, and then Yellow Hoste is an interesting one.
Mhm.
I actually did a podcast in Spanish yesterday with Jose Manuel. I can remember Zumoza. He'll be actually streaming the broadcast in Spanish for CrossFit, and he had Yellow Hoste in 11th. I thought it was a little bit of a strange pick. Yellow Hoste is this guy that most people were worried about his quarterfinal performance. He did great in quarterfinals. He has the full attention of Andre Houdet in terms of men in this competition because Tommy Pieri did not qualify. Andre Houdet is one of the best minds and managers of athletes when it comes to a competition weekend. He has a very precise systems. Yellow Host Day thrives in that environment. They're very, very cerebral. They're not going to be thrown off by things that don't go their way. And think about the workouts that I described for Lazar and Henrik. This guy can run, this guy can bike, this guy can row, this guy's, I mean, he had a top 5 finish in the ring muscle up workout at the games last year. Legless rope climbs are perfect for a guy who's 6'3" with big hands and strong pulling capacity. Um, Mass moves mass. The snatch ladder he's gonna finish it. There's gonna be guys in this field that don't. There were a lot of guys in Europe last year that only snatched 265 as a max. Yellow Hoste, I think, is a lock for the CrossFit Games, and the top 5 guys on this list are the only 5 guys that I think are a lock for the CrossFit Games in Europe.
So I'm going to say now you only have what 5 others on this particular list. We'll switch over to the full list. But how many athletes do you think are going to be fighting for the final 5 spots in your estimate?
At least 10.
Yeah. So you got 10 athletes. So again, this is like Brian said. This is what he's going to be doing most of the time when he's producing content is paying attention to these races. And I think these are the most compelling races, unless it's something close to the top. But or the podium. But the final spots are always. I mean, I think about West Coast, and I think about Kelly Baker on that final event. Her tripping on that sandbag, and the drama that was brought up. I mean, when it comes to these athletes for these last spots, we're talking seconds and inches make the
Yeah,
difference between them being at the games and in the instance of someone like Daniel and Victor making their first appearance at the games, and then you have athletes like Luca, who he's lost trips to the games based on seconds and inches and stuff like that. So um, this is the part I'm looking forward to.
yeah, and so I mean, I think that it would probably be unfair to Moritz Fiebig, even though I have him ranked 7th below Anjol there.
Yeah.
Like, I consider him a little bit different than the other athletes in that second group of 5. He was 3rd place at the semifinal last year, despite having a little bit of a trip up on the legless rope climbs for part of that event. He's I feel most comfortable of the next 5 guys that he'll make it through. I just think he's going to have a little bit of regression this year compared to last year. Moritz, nothing bad to say about him. But when you look at the other 4 guys there, I would have even a little bit more uncertainty about them.
Mhm.
Um, of those, of Anjol, Uldis, Luca, and Victor, Uldis is the next athlete that I don't. There's nothing that sexy about Uldis Upanex. He's just
Sevon
very solid.
Sevon would disagree.
Sevan would disagree. He would say there's something extremely sexy about Uldis
Exactly.
Upanex, but in terms of his competition performances, um, he's like he's basically like he's I don't know what
Say it.
he's like the European Colton Mertens. The
Exactly.
guy
Mhm.
just gets the job done. He's a very, very good runner. He'll get off to a good competition. My concern for Uldis Upanex is the snatch ladder. That overhead position with the snatch is probably his biggest weakness. He's okay on the bike. We have to see the bike twice. He's okay on the row. We have to see the row. There's a lot of there's the run will not be on a machine, but it's when you only have 6 workouts and you have to bike twice and you have to row once, and and then you have to the legless rope climbs are at advantage for a bigger guy. What's up, Colton? Um, so in this group of guys, Uldis is, I think, in jeopardy of potentially missing the games because the guys that are outside of the top 10 that are not on this page right now are very talented. And for some of them, the workouts actually line up, I think, a little bit better. Uldis would outperform a lot of these guys at the CrossFit Games and has outperformed a lot of these guys at the CrossFit Games. But he's got to get there first. So that kind of leaves us with Anjol, Luka, and Victor. And even though Luka Jukic is a veteran of the CrossFit Games from 2021, he qualified via an online competition. So he's never been in person at the CrossFit Games semifinals at the qualifying stage, done the job, stood there, had his name announced, and had a chance to celebrate in front of the crowd. He wants that more than anything. He's been hitting the road and training to compete and competing to learn so that he could come here in France this year and experience that and experience it with his brother. I was there. We were there in 2022 at the Lowlands Throwdown. He was in a qualifying position going into the final event. It was muscle ups, bike, and overhead squats, 10 of them at 225 pounds or 100 kilos. And several athletes struggled on that workout, Uldis being amongst them, but he'd done enough to be in a solid position. Adrian Moonweiler and Luka Jukic, watched spots at the CrossFit Games slip from their fingers as Moritz Fiebig dominated that workout, went from 8th to 4th. And Enrico Zanoni, another guy who's not on this list, he's not even in my top 15, but we'll talk about the total depth of Europe in a second, passed them by and took those spots away. Luka, at this way back in, when was the first time I saw him? Maybe it was in Dubai. He told me that he had 3 competitions this year that he wanted to defend. One of those was the Athens Throwdown. I'm in Greece right now because we just covered the Athens Throwdown. He wasn't there. He passed up that and almost a guaranteed 8,000 euros for the opportunity to be as good as possible competing in Lyon this weekend. I think it's going to be tight for him, but I think he's going to get the job done.
Which is kind of a change because at the beginning of the year, beginning of the, I guess, the off season, Luca was, I think he was more trending in like, hey, I'm just gonna do events, make a living off it. If I make the games, I do it, or if I make semifinals, I make the games. So be it. But then that kind of shifted. He got a new coach. He left the training program and coach he was with for many years. He picked up a coach in Kiefer from Underdogs, and you've seen an attitude shift. You've seen him take this a lot more seriously in terms of the game season. And a motivated one, Luca is probably a dangerous Luca.
Yeah, and so that leaves Anjol Kai and Victor Hoffer. These of the athletes that I have in the top 10 here, those would be the 2 rookies to the CrossFit Games. It was interesting that Jose picked both of them as well. We had 9 of the same top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I saw that there's some comments about asking about Colin Bossard. There's certainly a bunch of other athletes we could ask about, and the chances that I get all 10 of these right are very small. I mean, some things always happen. But I've known Anjol Kai for a while, and some people would say that gives me this proximity bias or favoritism or whatever. But
100%.
I've seen him. I've seen him compete against these athletes a lot. I know what this guy is capable of. Just because someone's capable of something doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the maturity of an athlete is more than just getting stronger. It's more than just getting fitter. It's more than just solidifying weaknesses. And in the case of Anjol Kai, I think that his mental graduation in terms of how he handles adversity is critical. If you just want to, and a huge advantage for him. And if you just want to talk about on the competition floor, last year he was 34th in the first event. And it was just, quite frankly, it was too much for him to overcome at that point. Because he didn't have the capacity to get multiple top 5 finishes to offset something like that. If you look we'll get to Bronislaw in a second. I think I have him one spot out of the top 10. Uh, Fabian Benito is like a mentor for Aniola Kai, and Fabian Benito is a momentum athlete. Aniola Kai is a momentum athlete, and Aniol, I believe, will have a top 5 finish right out the gates, and he'll be sitting in a great spot going into day number 2. He come to those workouts on day number 2. Um, he's very good. He's going to be very good at the front squat toe to bar double under workout, and the third workout is, what's the order of the workouts? What's number 3?
Number 3 is the uh, not the Toda bar.
No, that's number 2. Uh, I'm sorry that I can't remember the actual order. Maybe you can check it if you want, Patrick. But either way, I think Aniol is going to get off to a great start in this competition, and I think that he's going to be able to ride that momentum through. I'm not worried about him on the snatch ladder, and I do think there are some other guys. 3 is the legless rope climbs. Thank you, Lynn. Aniol's got pretty good upper body pulling capacity. I actually did some legless rope climb workouts with him when I was in at the training culture in San Sebastian earlier this year. He's great on the bike. He's great on the box jumps. I just think he's got a lot. He's going to have momentum, and he's going to roll through this weekend. He's not the type of athlete that gets ahead of himself. He learned his lesson at Pamplona. He ended up losing by like a microsecond on a tiebreaker to Uldis Upanex. The way that he handled that was very different from the way that I've seen him handle things in the past. And he almost immediately was able to apply that lesson towards future scenarios and express that to me. So Aniola Kai is my, if I had to pick one rookie from Europe that I think is going to make the CrossFit Games, he's the one I would pick. And Victor Hofer
Home
is,
country favorite.
yeah. So Victor Hofer and Uldis Upanex, I know I don't have them at the bottom of the list of the 10, but those are the 2 that I'm really going to be looking at, and I'm really going to be looking at one specific event. For Uldis, it's a snatch, and for Victor, it's event number 1. Mm-hmm. If Victor Hofer manages to finish event number 1 inside the top 15, I believe he'll make the CrossFit Games. If he finishes outside the top 20 on that event, I think it's going to be pretty difficult. And if he finishes in that 16 to 20 range, which is actually where I think he's going to finish, then I think it's going to come down to less than 5 points by the end of the weekend for Hofer to go to the games or not. The advantage that I think Victor Hofer has is Steve Fawcett, quite frankly. It seems to me, from everything that I know about Victor, about HWPO, and about Steve, that team is a great fit for him. And I think that this is important for people to understand as well. There isn't a bad training camp. There isn't a bad program. But not every program and not every training camp is for every athlete. And sometimes you just find something that works.
Yep.
I think that in this case, HWPO and Victor Hofer is a very, very positive fit. And I think that in the moments, this is a young man, this is a young athlete, but in the moments that matter, which is if things don't go your way, I don't think that he could find a better person to kind of redirect his mental focus than Steve Fawcett. The other thing is, Victor Hofer won me over on the final day of semifinals last year. And it wasn't because he pirouetted at this blink of an eye. That workout is a home run for him. He doesn't have quite that home run this year. We don't know what that handstand walk is, but either way, there's a lot of rowing in it. There's no workout that has handstand walk pirouettes, seated legless rope climb, and wall facing strict handstand pushups all in combination with each other. There was a workout previously in that season that did have a bunch of high school gymnastics, and they were paired with a variety of squats. He set a world record on that workout. We think about the toes to bar double under front squat workout, that looks like it's great for him. You think about the legless rope climb workout, we'll see. Legless rope climb workout in general is going to come down to the last 2 rounds. It does not matter how well you're doing on the rounds leading up to that. And young athletes, I sometimes get concerned about that because it's really touchy to have that kind of to understand your capacity on those things and not go too early. But it was the final workout last year that really won me over for Victor Hofer. There was not necessarily anything about biking fast, power output, and sandbags that made me think Victor Hofer was going to have a standout performance there. He won his heat, and he put himself in a really, really close position to making the games. Ultimately, Fabian Benito got the job done and swiped that last spot for both him and Colin. And I think we're going to have something very similar this year where those last points are going to be, I mean, that last workout is going to be critical, and there's going to be multiple guys within a few points fighting for that last spot. So those are the reasons why I think that those guys are going to make it. Um, but I think we're now going to kind of flip over to a bunch of other guys who absolutely have a chance and who absolutely should believe they have a chance. And my hope, honestly, is that they're motivated by the fact that they're outside the top 10 just as much as these guys are motivated by the fact that they're in it. Just generally speaking, the European semifinal is my favorite semifinal to go to. I know that Australia and South America are incredible environments, but I am so pumped for what we're going to see here because now that we have it on our screen, you can see some of these other athletes that I've left out. You guys asked about Branislav Alenkovic. You asked about Colin Bossard. We also have Mikhail Wazalowski, who made the games last year. Nika Maizaradze, who I got really lucky, honestly, to get to see him compete at Eurasia Throwdown this year, and I was completely blown away. And then you have Fabian Benito, who we've already talked about, who made the games last year. When he competes healthy, Aniol hasn't beat him yet. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just not sure how healthy he is. If Fabian is coming into the semifinal and he's feeling good, I think one of the guys I have in the top 10 are going to be left out because he can do it. But I'm not 100% sure that he's 100% healthy. And then that's where I would draw the line. And I don't want to say that any of these other guys do not have a chance. I don't want to say that any of those other guys are not great. But I think that what I have in the top 15, that the 10 guys who end up going to the games are going to come out of those 15 people.
Which is saying a lot because you still have athletes like Guillaume Brion, Enrico Zanoni, who've made it to the games. But that shows the depth of the field um, of Europe, where it's been a couple of years since those guys have competed at the games, but they're well known in Europe. You would think that Guillaume Brion you might have some of the home field advantage being competing in his home country, but yeah, I agree. Like I said, 10 athletes competing for those final 5 spots. It's going to be a lot of races. I'm just excited because there's a possibility where if Victor Hoffer, and kind of going back to Victor Hoffer and is that those two guys, if they make it to the games and they go to they have the potential to be probably some of the more popular athletes in the field in terms of like fans will instantly be attracted to them because Victor has he's a young charismatic essentially almost a teenager, and then Annual with his hair. I mean, the guy's probably going to be competing for the best hair amongst the men's and women's field, and yeah, he's also a great guy. Like I said, those two guys, we both you've actually got to know Annual really well, but just getting them, meeting him in Dubai, it was kind of neat just watching Victor. He actually even looks up to some of those Spanish guys because I know he learned a lot from them at Dubai. So, but man, what an impressive! I mean, Luka Vunjak. I know Harry Lightfoot's probably looking at this, going, "Damn you, Brian!" Yeah,
Yeah, he absolutely is. But Harry's just a good dude. Like he
great,
will.
great dude.
I mean, and here's the thing. We haven't gotten to a point on this list, and I think you're showing down to 25 of an unimpressive male athlete in the field.
Yeah,
Gregor
Victor.
Marjovic was inside the top 15 last year.
Yeah,
Just nobody really. I think maybe he was 16. But the guys that you guys are talking about as your dark horses, I don't really think that they're dark horses.
yeah.
It's someone said it in here that there's just not enough spots, and it's I thought there would be 12 spots. I think Europe can support 12 spots based on their performances. We have not done the women yet, Jake. That's coming up very soon. Um, and but they only get 10. And so there are athletes. And here's the thing. Patrick and I talked about this a month ago before the quarterfinals happened. We told you guys that there would be athletes who you believe should be at the semifinals that won't, and there are athletes who you believe should be at the CrossFit Games that won't. There's just not enough spots. That's why we're out here covering all these other competitions, because there's so many good athletes in the world now that they need other outlets to compete. The CrossFit Games has chosen to have a system that has 40 spots at semis and 40 at the games. It's not bad or good. It's just what it is. And so athletes and coaches need to adapt to that. They need to say like, okay, on any given year, it might not go my way. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to try. I'm not going to train. I'm not going to have full belief, and I'm not going to go out there and leave everything that I have to make my dreams come true. But at the end of the day, I look left and right in the warm up area. I look left to right in the corrals, and I'm in heat number 2, and I'm like, damn, all of these guys are savages.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited by that as a fan. As a competitor, it's a mixture. I mean, it's cool. It's really cool. If you made it to the European semifinal and you're a guy, you should be super proud. Look at that. Number 39 on my list, Nicholas
Mm-hmm.
Saraliadis. He's Greek. I was just talking to him 2 days ago. He's been training in CrossFit for 11 years. It's his first semifinal. He finally broke through, and he did it in the year that was the most difficult to do it. And he's probably going to finish in the bottom 5. Does that mean that he's not a good athlete? Absolutely not. The guy, he podiumed in Eurasia. But this is just what we're talking about. You know, we have the fittest guys in different countries. Kevin Jers is the fittest in Estonia. Well, Miko Liliorg, I have ranked quite a bit ahead of him. Sven Jeans, the fittest guy in Belgium. And we got athletes from France, from England, from Italy, and they're all great, but they can't all make it. And so Branislav and Wazalowski, Majzoradze, Bossard, and Benito are 5 guys that I absolutely think can make it. I don't think all 5 of them can make it, but if 1 or 2 of them do, I won't be surprised.
Yeah, and I think the reason why is some of those guys have home runs, some of them have glaring holes in terms of that, and then the 5 that you did pick are probably more well rounded than some of those. I
Should I
mean, you
tell
look
you?
at,
Should I tell you my Heat 1 picks for shot callers?
do we have time?
I don't know. I'm not in a rush. But
Yeah.
I will just say this. If you don't know who Nika Majzoradze is, consider going back and watching our cover of the Eurasia Throwdown. It'll give you a little context for what you're going to see this weekend. The guy rode a 16:47 5K. 16:47 5K. And I was told by a good friend of his who played football, American football, with him for 10 years that he's a better runner
At Georgia,
than he is
not,
rower.
not for the University of Georgia, the country.
The country. Yes. He's amazing walking on his hands. He's amazing at ring muscle ups. The only thing I'm concerned about for Nika is the snatch ladder. And I absolutely think that he is going to win some fans this weekend. If you don't know who I'm talking about, go back and look at some of our stuff. He looks like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, as many of you have pointed out. And I
Mhm.
think that he's going to be in the mix. And it's cool. It's really cool. He's 24 years old. He's only been doing CrossFit for like 3 years. He broke his foot last year, so he didn't get to compete in the season. But he's really, really good.
All right, well, that's it for the men, right? You want to move on to the women?
Yeah.
All right.
The ladies, best for last. In terms of those 2 at least.
Yeah.
Another sick graphic here for PC, and I mean I don't think we need to spend much time at the top. Laura and Gabby, as we talked about in the intro, are the top 2 in Europe, and basically until someone does something about it, I don't know how you could say anything else. What I will say is I think Laura Horvath, she didn't win semifinals last year. She didn't finish second. She was third. Uh, I think she's going to win this going away. I think she has the potential to win as many as 5 of these 6 workouts. To win as many of 5 of these 6 workouts. I don't think she's going to win the first workout. I think Gabby will win that. But the next 5 workouts, if we just think about what they are and what Laura Horvath's skill sets are, she doesn't have to do any handstand push-ups, handstand walking and rowing, great. Legless rope climbs and bike and box jumps, come on. Rope climb, bike, lunge, come on. Snatch, Karen Frey might be able to beat her in a 1 rep max snatch. She's not beating her in a snatch ladder. And
Yeah.
as I leave the toes to bar, double under, and front squats, she might walk away from this with 585 points out of 600 possible points. I think it's going to be the most dominating performance from any athlete, male or female, across all of semifinals. And I don't think she's even going to need to go to the dark places to do it.
Yeah. I believe so. I think so. I think obviously we said Laura and Gabby, it's those 2, but again, I think even there, Laura's going to separate herself. However, that second group, I actually think Karen Freyova is probably just separating herself from Emma Tall, Emma McQuaid, and even Elisa Fuliano. I mean, do you agree, disagree with me, or do you think it's a lot closer amongst those athletes?
I think Karen's kind of in a little class of her own right
That's what
here. Emma, what is this? Something. always happens. Karen Frey did great last year. She was fourth. Only Annie Thorsdottir was ahead of her because and Annie's obviously not competing this year. And then Gabby and Laura. Karen Frey had a 14th place finish at the games. Don't worry about what happened at the Rogue Invitational.
Yeah.
And don't worry, CJ. Laura is not feeling any pressure. um, and yeah, I think Emma Tall is the only other athlete that could beat Karen Frey this weekend if everything goes perfectly, but I feel like Karen is a pretty solid pick for the 3 spot. She just competed here in Athens Throwdowns. I know there are people that would say, "Oh, I'm concerned about her because she just competed." If you watched, you would understand there's no reason to be concerned. She did one lift on the lifting complex. It was good enough for third. She won the comp. She had half as many points as the next closest competitor. She never looked like she was stressed. She never looked like she was breaking a sweat hardly. I mean, she worked hard. She executed her plan well. Um, but it was she called it a practice weekend, and it was a practice weekend that just also happened to put 8,000 euros in her pocket. And I think she's going to have a very solid semi.
Mhm. So what is it about Emma? I mean, what are strengths, weaknesses? It seems like Emma's one of those athletes who, when she's at the game, she does well, but nothing really stands out when it comes to someone like Emma.
Are you talking about Emma Tall?
Yeah, Emma Tall. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, she's th- this is one of these things about this sport. She was the third highest finishing European athlete at the games last year,
Hmm.
and we saw almost nothing of her the whole weekend
Yeah.
because that's how the CrossFit Games are. They really, really filter and funnel towards the top athletes. She had I think her best finish at the games was on the biking event. Oh no,
Okay.
she did win an event. She won Alpaca Redux, and then
Hmm.
she had third on the bike. So we saw her on one event. The ride was like, the interval, she was her top 5 finish. So she has some like good potential, but um, the it's just hard to get a lot of attention in the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Ematal is super solid. I was surprised that Jose didn't have inside the top 10. I also think that, because obviously her and David Shrunke are super close. Last year, it was a massive moment for them in their career. I mean, they have been sort of like the two of them against the world for a decade plus now. They're as close as they can get. But I remember being at the games a few years ago when Emma made it and David didn't. And is the best supporter you could ask for. I don't think that it's a negative at all that he didn't make it. I don't think it really matters. I
Yeah.
still think that she's easily going to qualify for the games. I think she barely missed the podium here, but top 5 without very much worry is my guess for Emma Tall.
So let's talk about the other Emma, Emma McQuaid. Obviously, last year, dealt with some injuries, had to withdraw from the games. So far, the early, especially quarterfinals, she looks impressive. She looks like the back to the old Emma.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the older athletes on this list, maybe the oldest. Jacqueline Dahlstrom's close,
Hmm.
but and Emma Tall is up there too. But that's not an issue really on the women's side. Emma McQuaid, I think, is absolutely poised for a bounce back year. I think very similar to BKG. She was competing, not at 100% last year with her body. She still was good enough to make the games, but she had a massive regression, whereas BKG had a small regression. It seems like she's healthy. It seems like she's still motivated and hungry to compete. I think Emma McQuaid again is going to be this. That's where I would kind of say like again, where we said in the top 5, I felt really confident for the men. I feel the same way for the women. I feel confident in the top 5. And I don't feel as confident in the next 5 for a lot of the reasons that people are already kind of throwing out in the chat over theirs. And
Hmm.
we'll do the same thing we did
Lana.
with the men is kind of look at that next 5 or 8 women outside of the top 10 that are absolutely in the conversation.
Yeah, and granted, like I said, we'll get to her, but this list originally had at number 10 Sarah Sigmundsdottir, and we had to make that change after she made that announcement this morning that she withdrawing for semifinals due to some health reasons. But yeah, Elisa Fuliano, that's someone that popped up 2 years ago. We thought she was maybe one of those one and done athletes. She deals with some really bad arthritis. It looks like she has that under control. And bounced back last year and had a really good year, I thought, especially at the games. And she's just one of those athletes who is just pretty well rounded. She did. I think she's a really highly skilled athlete, but she surprises me with her strength numbers as well.
Yeah, it's Fuliano. I'm a believer.
Yeah.
She's been consistent at the big competitions over time. Now, for to play kind of the devil's advocate against myself, if you look at Dubai this past year, Andrea Solberg beat her, Claudia Gluck beat her, Manu Nangonis beat her. Um, but she was up there in the top 5, 6, and she was, the points were relatively close. It's the consistency over time. And I thought that she was kind of a specialist. I thought that, the gymnastics would be a thing that she would excel at. Some weightlifting, the monostructure would be difficult. But no, I've seen enough from her that I can't justify not picking her to make the CrossFit Games. Like I said, these athletes 5 through 10 or 6 through 10, excuse me, I don't feel like I am I'm confident that not all of them are going to make the games. Again, it's just like on the men's side, if I got all 10 right, that would be crazy. But Fuliano, of these ones, I would say Fuliano and Magnon, I feel better about than the other ones,
Mhm.
um, because of the consistency.
Yeah. I would I would say that. I mean, I don't know definitely about a Fuliano. I don't know about Manon. I'm just it's like I would if she would have been able to make the games prior to last year, gave us a little bit more data. Obviously, I think she had a very good Rogue Invitational. She's one of those athletes that used to compete at a lot of events. It looks like she's kind of backed down from that and concentrated more on training. But I don't know. Again, like you said, there's another 10 athletes for 5 spots. But one athlete there between Fuliano and Angonese is your only rookie that you're predicting from the women's field in the Europe is not even, I mean, she's a rookie, but she's someone that we've known for a while, is Claudia Gluck. What makes you think that Claudia Gluck's going to break through this year? And, is it the programming or is it just what you saw from her at Dubai?
Yeah, I think Claudia is. I'm honestly, I think she's a little bit of a risky pick. There are a lot of athletes that could certainly swipe the spot from her. She had basically a last place finish on workout one last year, and then she had a 40th or something on the other running workout, the snatch buy-in. Um, yes, it's similar to Victor Hoffer. There's that running workout right out the gate, and I think that her finish on that workout is going to go a long way towards how she ends up doing for the weekend. But I do think that Claudia has made a change, and I think that she has a chance to actually do quite well on a couple workouts. The toe to bar double on her front squat workout, I think she can have a top 5 finish on. She won the front squat EMOM workout in Dubai. She's got pretty good capacity on in the toes to bar. We're in that workout as well. Uh, and the legless rope climbs is going to be another interesting one for her because at the 2022 Lowlands Throwdown, she was winning the legless rope climb event
And
until rope climb number 9, and she completely imploded, and that was basically the end of her weekend. So she has questions to answer. I would say that this is the riskiest pick of the ones that I have here, but I think that I'm picking her. I don't know what else to say. I'm picking her, but she's absolutely has to execute.
I think amongst the 10 that you picked her, she's the smallest athlete of them. And that's saying a lot because Emma McWade and Jacqueline Dahlstrom are slight. They're maybe a little bit taller, but Claudia's, she's a little bit shorter, but especially amongst these women here. But I think it's I don't disagree with that pick. Maybe not at 7th, but who knows? um, okay, moving on. Rounding out their top 10, making it to the games. Jacqueline Dahlstrom. We all know her, familiar with her, and Rebecca Vidison, who last year, I think at age 29, finally broke through and made the games as an individual after transitioning from being a team athlete to being an individual athlete.
Yeah, I mean, Jacqueline was as close as you could be to making the games last year. Obviously, there was some potential controversy that was talked about with the air runners. I still think that she's got what it takes to qualify for the games, and I also like the change from coaching.
Mhm.
She's been working with John Singleton, who's been her partner, is her partner, and has been her coach for a long time. And I think that it takes a mature both athlete and coach to make a change late in a competitive career.
Yeah.
But we saw something very similar with Katrin David's daughter. 2 years ago, she didn't make the CrossFit Games. She changed it up. She went with HWPO. I mean, I have spoken with Katrin and with the coaches from HWPO about some of the specific changes that they made. and she backed that up by qualifying to the games and finishing inside the top 10. Jacqueline Dahlstrom, 1 year later, I think is in a very, very similar situation where she didn't make the games last year. She went with HWPO, just like Hoffer. It seems like it's a positive fit. When I've spoken to Marconi, Godinez, Fawcett about her, they're loving working with her. It seems to be quite natural. She has full support from John, and I think that this is going to be a little bit of a redemption year for her, a bounce back year. And she's an athlete that, once she makes it to the CrossFit Games, even if she qualifies one of the last spots in Europe, I think she has the chance to finish inside the top 20 there.
Yeah, I mean, she's probably one of the nicest people in CrossFit, and also probably one of those the hardest working. I mean, we look back at this. I mean, that games moment, that one like moment, for her would be, you think about her in the sandbag, clean, you know, lifting twice her size and going head to head with Danny Spiegel. But that'd be cool. I really do hope that Jacqueline does. So Rebecca Vidison, you originally had her 11th, one spot out of your one spot out away from qualifying. She moves up because you had Sarah Sigmundsdottir originally at 10.
To
Yeah,
be fair, when I made these lists, I didn't know how many qualifiers there were. And I
true.
actually thought, like the men, that the women would probably get 12 this year.
Hmm.
As it is, they get 10. And yes, Sarah Sigmundsdottir announcing that she's not competing this year obviously it slides everyone up who was below her by one spot. Sarah Sigmundsdottir was a bit of an emotional pick. I really did believe that she could do it. I also wanted her to do
Hmm.
it.
Yeah,
Vidison, I know a lot of people are picking Vidison somewhere between 7 and 10. And that absolutely makes sense. To me, what Rebecca Vidison did at semifinals last year was surprising. What she did at Wadapalooza this year was encouraging. And the combination of those two things makes me think that she will absolutely be in the mix.
yeah, and I think what was more encouraging is that prior to Wadapalooza, she'd made that switch to brute strength, and it looked like immediately it was paying off. And we talked to her about that when we had her live on stage. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses the rest of the season.
And I don't know if it's like it was paying off or not. It didn't seem like it deterred her. It didn't
Yeah.
slow her down. Like it was a seamless transition.
Hmm.
Sometimes making those changes, it takes a little bit of time to kind of come to fruition. But that one seemed kind of very natural, not a lot of interruption in terms of what she's capable of. So I think Vidison is a vet. She's a veteran. She should be confident, and she has the fitness to back it up. So I think that I feel pretty good about this top 10, but it's like I said, I would be shocked if I got them all right.
Yeah. So let's talk about the other five. I mean, again, we're predicting 10 fighting for 10 five spots. I could even argue there might be even
I
15
think
because
down to 8. I think down
yeah,
to 18 on the list is where I
yeah,
would kind of draw a line here.
there's some names here that are very impressive. I mean, so let's take a look at that. Again, we already talked about Rebecca. You have Thury, who obviously she's been at games 9 times, 9-time games veteran.
Turi Helgadottir, yes, 8 or 9.
Hmm.
She first qualified for the games in 2013. I saw someone who was asking about Icelandic women. Yeah, there's not as many as Icelandic women. Obviously, Sarah's out, Katrine's out this year, Annie's pregnant. So you got Turi and Björgos who are representing Iceland. And I think Turi has an absolute chance. Very similar to Jacqueline Dahlstrom. She wasn't far off of making the games this last year. There wasn't a big controversial thing surrounding it, but and she didn't make a big coaching change in the off season. She is a steady professional. She's going to be in the fight. She's going to be in the battle. She lifts well. She moves well. She's got all the gymnastic skills. I think she's going to be right on the cut line. I think it's going to be tough to make it, but I do think she has a chance.
Yeah. It's funny because you bring up the two Icelandic. I mean, they're opposite scales. You have Thury, who's 32 years old, and then you have the teenager. She's 17, so she actually has another year of competition in the team division.
Other women that are just outside of my top 10 there, Jennifer Muir, Emily Lundberg, Amy Kringle, Andrea Solberg.
Hmm.
Even Linda Kishman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so tough. Like those 5 names I just said are phenomenal athletes. All
Hmm.
of those athletes have a chance to make the CrossFit Games. If you just look at some of the off-season stuff, Emily Lundberg ended up sneaking the podium in Madrid. Andrea Solberg had the performance of her career in Dubai,
Goodbye.
take second place there. There has been a trend of athletes doing well in Dubai and then parlaying that into a CrossFit Games qualification. I
Mhm.
believe that either Solberg or Gluck will do that. I picked Gluck this weekend, but don't sleep on Solberg. I think someone might have mentioned her earlier when we
Yeah,
first pulled them up. Um, so Solberg and Gluck are, like Patrick said, they're some of the smaller athletes, but they're stronger than you think, and they
they
have some
just
good competition experience that they can be riding momentum from.
they don't have like raw strength, but they have that strength capacity. Um, you know, yeah. So I mean, especially when it comes to squatting movements, the athlete here, I mean, Emily Lundberg, we know how she's strong. I mean, if there was like a you know, any her upper body pulling is probably one of the best, if not the best, in this field as well. We saw that at Wadapalooza when they were doing the strict pull-ups, and she pretty much did all the strict pull-ups for their team. Um, and Jennifer Muir was someone that just popped up on last year, was in contention for a spot up until the final day. She's got another year of experience. I would like to see her do a little bit more off-season competitions. She elected to do Fit Fest with the team, which I think was a great move for her because she got to hang out with a lot of veterans, a lot of athletes, and kind of pick their brains. And again, she's coached by Steve Fawcett as well as and she trains alongside another teenager, well, not teenager, but another young athlete, Ella Wilkinson, who you have at 22nd. So people are expecting her. I know Pedro's really high on her. Um, and then the athlete that I really, really do think is going to put up a hell of a run is Amy Kringle. I just think the workouts, they just work to her advantage. She moves very well. She can do endurance. She has capacity. She's in her. I mean, you saw her strength numbers of taking a jump this year. I think these workouts are just perfect for her. The gymnastics, she's very comparable in the gymnastics. I would not be surprised if she's one of those people uh, making her first appearance at the games. But again, it's going to be a tough field. She has just a murderer's row of athletes. Like I said, you talk about Linda Kiesman. I mean, you can go down to Norte. I mean, Elena has made it to the games multiple times, and then of course at 20 is that high rocks, non-high rocks athlete Miriam von Rohr. It just gets it's a murderer's row. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm a little bit jealous that you're going to be watching all of this and calculating all these results in your head as you figure them out.
I think for a lot of these women that on this cut line that it's going to come down to the legless rope climb workout.
Yeah, I agree.
Because what I said earlier with just when those things go, they go. And if you look back at the 2022, a lot of these women in this range didn't do
Mhm.
great on that workout.
Yeah,
But then you think about someone like Gabby Magawa. She's not great at legless rope climbs. If I was with these girls, I would be going back and watching what Gabby did in that workout. She had a clock.
Lance.
She had a plan. She literally, it was running and legless rope climb. She didn't run. She walked
Yeah.
because she knew that to do 10 legless rope climbs, I needed X amount of rest before I was able to do that.
Hmm.
And here's the thing, it doesn't matter how well you do against the field on that workout.
Yeah.
You need to optimize your performance. Do not give away points. The girls that do that the best, even if it's a 15th place or a 20th place, if it's a 15th instead of a 20th or a 20th instead of a 25th, those are the points that are going to be the difference. It's going to come down. I would not be surprised in both the men's and women's side if there are 3 to 5 athletes within 5 to 10 points on the cut line.
Mm.
And when you're looking at one workout that has the capacity, the potential to really, really make the difference for the women, I think it's a legless rope climb workout. So when we said that, talking about what we're going to be doing on site, that's what I'm going to be watching. Who amongst these 8, 9, 10 women that we're talking about executes that workout well? That's the one that I think is gonna do the best. For a couple of them, the same can be said about the last bar on the snatch. And
Yeah.
if they execute the last bar on the snatch and they don't miss any legless rope climbs, I think that they'll be going to the games. The ones that make those mistakes, probably not.
Yeah. I agree. Well, before we move on from Europe, you also included in your picks teams. So we haven't given the teams as much love, but we'll briefly talk about them before we move on to Asia. But first C23 CrossFit, the program motion. You know, I mean, I really can't disagree with that, just based on the names, the quality of individuals, the athletes on that roster.
I think the top three teams there, throw them in a bag, mix them up, that there's going to be the top three teams at the competition. I think I would draw a line after the top three. I don't know for sure which one of those is going to have the best performance. I think that the Walleye team with the Simmons is just going to get better and better as
Mhm.
the year goes on. That program motion team, I think, is just the best team.
Team.
Like they have the most team experience. I think that at this stage of the season, that's going to be beneficial for them. But I wouldn't be surprised if it went any way between those top three.
Yeah, and they're taking 8 teams from 8 teams. So right now we're looking at 3 Krieger teams, and well, if you include Butcher's Lab as well, I believe they were coached by Seaman as well. So um, yeah, looks like
This is a stacked field. I mean, when you
it is.
the teams in Europe is stacked. I ranked them 1 through 20. I think that down to maybe you're scrolling too fast for me. Down to
Sorry.
CrossFit Khan there in 14th. I think I might draw a little bit line. No, maybe down to Jana in 17. I would say the top 17 teams are all really good. Um, you know, but only 8 can make it, and I kind of preferred the teams that have really, really good team experience and team chemistry. And then I would say that I maybe took a little bit of a risk with picks 7 and 8. The Zaruts train cult team, I think I could see them being really good this weekend or having some struggles. And the CrossFit Porty team, I thought they were going to retire last year. They're running it back with the exact 4 same athletes that were top 10
Oh,
at the games 2 years
mhm.
ago. And I just felt like it was almost like a nod of respect to give them the final qualifying spot. But Jolly Sailor is good. The Butchers Lab X team is good. I was talking to Nico about them, and on down the list. Like I said, down to I feel really confident about the teams in the top 6.
Yeah,
Teams 7 through 17, 2 are going to make it, and 8 are not. And I think it's going to be competitive.
yeah,
But I mean, look, they only have 5 workouts. Like the margins for error is super small. 5 workouts in 2 days. Don't get me wrong. Whatever teams go to the games from Europe are going to do well. I wouldn't be shocked if all 8 teams from Europe that make the CrossFit Games finish inside the top half of the CrossFit Games
mhm,
teams.
yeah,
That's how good these teams are. I would expect 5 of them maybe to be, not maybe 4 to be in the top 10, and all of them to be in like half to be in the top 10, half to be in the next 10. And then I'm not quite sure yet if any teams from Europe can podium at the CrossFit Games. I think that the team I have in third there, that Walleye team with the Simmons, Horvath, who you guys were asking about, and Mia Hesketh at the games probably has the best chance. But I think there's just like they don't have that all-star like the Oslo team was, like the Peak 360 or Invictus teams, but they have some top 10 caliber teams for sure. Lynn says every team with Krieger and Butch is making it. I think there's almost too many teams
yeah,
for like they can't all make it, and there are some other teams that are really good that are not with that program as well.
yeah. But those are safe bets. All right, that wraps up the first semifinal of the weekend. Actually, the first semifinal, the one that's going to be televised, that you actually can watch from the beginning, that will be streamed and will be, I guess, in order, will be the Asia semifinal in Busan, Korea. I said Korean, Korea. Um, Brian will be in Lyon. I'm actually in Chicago, and I leave Thursday morning to head to Korea to cover. And the reason why I'm heading there is I really think, especially on the women's side, that this is gonna. There's some talent here, and I'm really interested to see the talent. Even some of the men. There's some men and some men in the men's field that I'm very interested in watching live. We haven't seen. I feel like we still haven't seen Arthur Semenoff for the athlete that he's supposed to be. Um, I think the athlete that he was in semifinals last year when he won was an athlete we did not get at the games for whatever reason. It might have been programming, who knows? But um, but yeah, I'll be heading to Busan. I will be getting there Friday night, and I can't
It
wait.
could just it could just also be kind of what happens with Karen Frey is
Yeah,
like he hasn't figured out how
that's
to
the
manage
thing.
the travel. It's
Yep.
challenging. Trust
Hmm.
me, it's challenging. I slept 0 hours one night. I slept 3 hours. Was awake for three. Slept for five. Last night slept 12 hours. Like if you don't have the financial means to get there 3 weeks early and get totally acclimated to a new environment, that messes with you. And we know how good these athletes are. We know how small the margins are. And if you're not firing on an optimal calendar, schedule, sleep cycle, nutrition, bathrooms, those types of things, it's hard to perform at your best.
Yeah. So 2 spots for the men. Um, really, I mean, there's no argument with that. I mean, I think whether giving 1 or 2 spots, but the 2 athletes you have, there are some familiar names in the field. But us talk about the 2 athletes that you picked. You picked Arthur Semenoff, who is a very safe bet, especially if he's healthy. Coached by Nick Fowler. Those who know Nick Fowler, he's also the coach of Spencer Panchak. He's coached some of the greats. Brent Fikowski, Carl Saunders. He was one of the original founders of Brute Strength. Just an overall good guy. He does a lot of great things outside of CrossFit. Yeah. What else about Arthur?
I think he's the guy to beat for sure. I think he's got all the tools. I think that the workouts line up really well for him. I think he's going to win this thing running away, and I think it's going to be a brutal battle for the second spot.
Yeah. And then number 2 is an athlete we just kind of learned about, but the thing is, we should have known about him a while because he's been around. He has some games experience. He has high level training. Is Ivan Kurkatsev?
Kukartsev, I think he was on the Kalashnikov team in 2021.
Yep.
More recently, he competed at the Madrid CrossFit Championships that I did the live stream for with Greg Langto, who will be emceeing at the French Throwdown, where he finished 13th, beating the likes of Luca Vuniak, Simon Mantila, Antoine Dumaine. So he put himself into a high level competition there in Madrid and did pretty well. Yes, Lynn, we went over this at the start of the show. He's highlighting a lot of or maybe almost all of them.
Yeah.
And absolutely, if you're interested in learning more about the athletes that not as many people know about, you should be following Known and Knowable 100%.
Him, and also I want to say also Clydesdale CrossFit usually does a good job around this time of bringing some of those semifinal, especially in the U.S. athletes on to interview them as well. I know he's already had Jack Rosema on and some other athletes, but go ahead. Sorry, Brian.
Kukartsev is in a similar situation to a few of the athletes we talked about in Europe. I think it's going to come down to event 1 for him. He has to stay relevant in event 1. He was 26th in the running event in Madrid. It was his worst finish by far. He was pretty damn good on everything else, and he will be pretty good on everything else. So if he does okay on the run, then I like his chances here. But the other athletes that are going to be in the mix have similar problems. Ant Haynes and the snatch ladder is a big concern to me. I don't think he's finishing that ladder. I'm not even sure he's going to finish the second to last bar on that ladder, and I think that that's ultimately going to keep him out of the games. Morteza Sadadgat actually qualified for the games last year. He's from Iran. I think he's going to be in the mix for sure. I don't know if he'll be able to go to the games this year if he qualifies or not. And Ilyas Kuliev is the other guy that I think has a chance. I think those top 5 are the clear top 5. I think that Kukartsev has the potential to have many top 3 finishes. And if he's able to salvage a top 10 on that first workout, I think that it'll be enough to get the spot. But Sadadgat, Kuliev, and Haynes is in the same as Kukartsev. The thing is, I think he's going to take like a 20th on the snatch.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he'll be able to overcome that. So,
and someone like Arthur and Ivan and Morteza will finish that snatch. Well, that'll be fun to watch.
Probably be the top 3 guys.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a fun race. I can't wait to watch those 3 guys, because especially if they're all in the middle lanes, it's going to be fun to watch. And also something
like just for context, last year at the semis, Artur snatched 295. Morteza snatched 290. Dude, this game's something is off with the game's website. Kuliev, no. Who was the other one we were talking about for the snatch? Oh, well, Kukartsev wasn't there, but he'll be fine on the snatch. Kuliev was a 265 was his snatch, so he's right on his limit.
Yeah, but Ivan is also a coach. I mean, we talked about Arthur's coach. We know who Ivan's coach is. It's David. I mean, Hackenbrook. Tommy Hackenbrook is his coach. So he's got some good pedigree, some wise. And Tommy's been coaching him for a while. He's been coaching that Kalashnikov team for a while. So, and I will say, if those 2 are the 2 that finish, I don't think either. Obviously, I don't think they have any problems with visa. Arthur and Ivan have both they've been in the U.S. within the last couple of years. So I think they're okay when it comes to traveling to the United States. So that'll be nice. I mean, we talk about it, but I think like the worst thing when it comes to Asia is like, it's almost like a defaulted spot. I will give Ant a lot of credit last year. He was, he came on a moment's notice. He was going to be here anyways, but he wasn't prepared. But did had his best games finish, and that's what I respect about him. Him and his brother, I can't actually wait to see and hang out with those guys as well.
Dude,
So
I am jealous about that.
yeah, yeah. So I just loved picking Ed and Ant. I mean, they're just great guys. If I had a couple more days, maybe go golfing with them. So yeah, that's pretty much the men's field. You ranked all the way 20.
I went to 20. I went to 20. I mean,
We
and
got our boy Nisam at 20. Nisam, I don't know if you remember, he's the guy we met in Dubai. He's the podium distributor.
yeah, I think he posted something recently.
He should be pro
But
actually.
I pretty much in all of the region, I wrote this at the top of the article. I went down as far as I felt like I reasonably could.
Yeah,
And it's basically was a multiple of 10 of their qualification spots. But the other 20 guys in Asia and the other 20 women in Asia, I don't know them very well. I basically would have just defaulted to their quarterfinals ranks. So all of the athletes on this list, I at least have some touch point for.
yeah, yeah. So moving on to the women.
I just want to address something about this snatch ladder.
Okay.
And because when the workouts first got announced, I was coaching at the gym. Patrick's like, we should do a show. No one else is doing a show. Let's do a show. So we did a show that night, and I basically gave my immediate gut reactions to all these workouts. And I said that I thought that someone was going to finish that workout in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. And my friend Andrew made a little reel about it, and he's like, this seems kind of a ridiculous claim. Let's see if it comes true. John Young, do you have a rebuttal, et cetera, et cetera? And I was like, man, maybe I'm way off on that. I've actually talked to a couple of the games athletes. The reason why I had said that is because in last year, prior to the games, I was up at HWPO training, and Jake Douglas, Jason Hopper, and Katrin David's daughter did that workout. And in my memory, in the moment of that night, I thought that Jake and Katrin had both finished between 3:15 and 3:30 or something like that, and Jason was maybe 45 seconds to a minute behind him. After Andrew made that post and a couple of games athletes reached out to me and they're like, dude, that's crazy. I reached out to one of the guys from over there and I was like, dude, we did another workout. It was a snatching and biking workout. You did that workout with them. Katrin did that one in about 3:15 and she beat you by a minute. I did the women's weights. So I think I just conflated those two. Andrew, he doesn't have the most grace for these types of things, so he might see this, clip it, and call me a fraud and all these other things, which is totally fine. He can do whatever he wants. But I did say that, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think that the winning time will be very close to 5 minutes on this workout, and that I was misremembering something.
Way to go. Just putting bad shit out there. Call yourself
Hey,
an
I don't know. I mean, look, if you speak publicly enough, you're going to say something that's maybe a little bit silly or wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah.
What I've been taught to do is to own those things. And actually, when it comes to Andrew, what I've always told him is thank you. He, for better or worse, he's the best that we have at holding people accountable and calling people out when they are off base. Sometimes I think he's off base for doing that, but he's I consider that as far as my friends grow, a good trait. I want friends that are going to call me on my shit.
I think that's what we all want. We all want someone to keep us accountable. I mean, that's why, hell, 30 years later, I'm still in the Army because they hold me accountable. So, speaking of accountable, I don't know how that transitions into the Asia semifinal, but anyways, all right, women get 3 spots. I think
3
it's
spots.
Pretty cut and dry with 1 or 2 or any version of that. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Sung Young Choi made the CrossFit Games, and I think that she made an impression despite finishing in the bottom 10. I think she made an impression. The next year, I think she won the community of the CrossFit Games over. Look, we have not really had anyone from Eastern Asia make an impact at the CrossFit Games ever. And she did that. She finished 26th that year. It was up to that point the best finish that anyone a woman from Asia had ever had. And last year she was injured, didn't get to compete, and Seher Kaya stepped right into her place and once again represented Asia extremely well on the women's side. She finished 23rd, besting that performance by 3 spots. You and I have talked about this off camera. With all of the women that are out of the picture this year in the CrossFit Games, Seher and Sungyoung Choi both have a chance to make the top 20 this year. They are both extremely talented. I believe both of them would be in the mix to qualify, even if they were competing in Europe. No guarantees in Europe,
Mhm.
definitely guarantees in Asia. I think these two run away with it. I don't know who will finish first or second. I'm giving a slight edge to Seher here. Um, Basically because I was so impressed with everything she did last year, and Sung Young Choi didn't compete. But when you have an athlete who doesn't compete for a year, and she was the better one the previous year, why couldn't she do it again? I think it'll be a fun battle for first and second, but I think that ultimately the drama in Asia is now going to be for that third spot, since for better or worse, they have 3 spots available.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Sahara has had a great offseason, finishing eighth in the Open. I think she finished 42nd, maybe better in the quarterfinals. Sung Young Choi has been right there too the whole season. She looks like she's 100% back from her shoulder injury, which is, for an athlete as strong as she is, because she is probably one of the stronger athletes in this women's field in Asia. It looks like she's having no issues with that. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch those two, because the first year Sung Young Choi kind of separated herself. Sahara was the first. Uh, I guess it was it Far East. I think it was Far East back then. The first time it was a semifinal.
Yep.
Sahara, I think she finished third, but that was her only first like live competition. So to see her like mature through this process, and now becoming one of those athletes who is just thriving, and she's benefiting from living and training in Norway with the Krager team. She has the best coaches. She Kristen Holtz as her mindset coach. She's constantly competing with some of the best athletes in Europe, in that gym every day. So it's going to be a fun race to watch between those two. And I think, again, like I said, whoever, I think those two are going to represent Asia very well. In at the games. So, but now let's talk about the third spot. I think there's basically 3 athletes that are competing for that third spot. You have Anastasia Dodonova, Dodonova, Dodonova. Sorry, there's too many O's,
I'll let you
too many
say it.
vowels. Like
Dodanova.
Dodonova.
Anyway, I completely agree with you. I think there's 3 women battling for the final spot. I'm giving a slight edge to Anastasia here. Basically, for the last 3 years, I would say, or maybe coming out of the COVID shutdown period, I've known that there are some really talented women in Russia, and
Mhm.
they just mostly have not shown up to compete at the semifinals for a variety of different reasons. There are a few of them that are competing this year. Anastasia, I believe, is the best of them. Um, but I would say this is a slightly risky pick. The other two, we can pull up the full list if you want here, are Dawan Zhang and Evie Hollis.
Yeah.
Um, for both Dawan and Anastasia, I actually, for all 3 of these women, just like in Europe, that legless rope climb is going to be critical. Uh, Evie's got some pretty small hands. She's got
Mhm.
some tremendous fitness. Like, she can
Yeah.
compete with Sungyoung and Saher on the straight fitness workouts, which is going to be event 2 and 6 primarily. Um, but on the legless rope climbs, I don't know. Anastasia and Dawan, both. I think I have it written down here. Yeah, there's a worse finish has been on legless rope climb workouts really recently. Um, but they're going to be pretty much good on everything else. So with the snatch should be fine for all of these women. Dawan's got I think a 180 snatch or something like that. Donova is not that far behind. So I'll be watching. I mean, you'll be watching in person, but I'll be watching to see who does the best on that legless rope climb workout, and it could come down to that.
Yeah, I definitely do, and that's workout 3. So we're looking, that's the middle workout on yeah, it's the final workout on Saturday. So we said that, hey, maybe Saturday isn't moving day because there's 3 workouts on Sunday, but I think having that workout the end of the day, it ends up becoming a moving day, because that workout is going to be the separator. And
Well, and we need to say there's a couple movements in CrossFit that they're just a lot different for women. And
mhm,
legless rope climbs is at the top of that list. There's
yeah,
no difference for them on the legless rope climb. The men have 14 and they have 14. 14 legless rope climbs for the men. Yes, there will be some that end up struggling with it when you look at the total 280 athletes competing, but the ones that are making the games, They have that capacity hands down. Not all of the women that will qualify for the CrossFit Games have that same capacity on that movement. That's okay. But that workout is going to weigh heavily in terms of the finishes, because um, if you screw that up, you're going to just be standing there. And it doesn't matter how fit you are, how strong you are, or anything else. Time and places on and points are just going to pass you by. So managing that workout well, like I'm going to reiterate it, managing that workout well for you, it has to be the priority for, especially for the women on the cut line.
Yeah. Well said, and I think it's going to come down to those three women fighting for that. I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards Evie just because of her experience. I mean, she's used to competing in high level competitions, not only in the Middle East but also in Europe. You know, she's a staple of the regionals. I think she competed as individual in regionals back when they had regionals. But she's no stranger. She lives out there in Abu Dhabi. Daewon is someone that she's a training partner of Sung Young Choi. She's someone that I thought was going to step into when Sung Young did not compete last year. I thought she was the one that was going to, replace her. Daewon, we were talking earlier on the phone. It was 62 reps on the final on workout 4 and quarterfinals, which is very impressive because we're talking 62 reps. That's the same as Sarah Signensauter, Haley Adams, Sydney McAlishan got 62 reps. Danielle Brandon got 63. I mean, that's good for 40th in the world. So when you're thinking of, and if you see Daewon, she doesn't look like a very imposing figure, but she has fitness, and she proved that last year. She just had a couple events that kind of got her. I think the Go Ruck event was what really hurt her, and I think it hurt a lot of women from Asia. I think the only athlete it didn't hurt was Budebs, but that's a perfect workout for her. So yeah, and then moving down, there's a couple other names. Omar Rashif, she's someone that's from Israel. She's someone that's she's been living out in Vegas for the last 6 months, competing with underdogs. She saw a major jump in her fitness, and then we have again. I'm always curious about the Russian athletes. We've been saying that for the last couple of years. We just don't know about the Russian athletes, but
Yep,
but
I got two others in the top 10 there, Anna Ivanova and Anastasia Smirnova, and then yeah, Omer, like you said, she's young. She's like 22 or 3 years old. Um, I think she's on the ascendancy. She didn't, I mean, she finished 18th out there last year. There is a lot of turnover in terms of women in Europe. Like half of the top 20 are not competing or are not in the semifinals this year. But I think she's improved and will move up into the top 10 this year. She's a good name to know. There hasn't, other than 2019, there hasn't been a representative from Israel, but she has the potential to do that, to be in the mix a couple years from now. The challenge is that Sung Young Choi and Seher Kaya are going to be there, but I think she's progressing in the right way.
Yeah, and I think it's again what we were talking about before. I think it's very encouraging for the region, especially on the women's side. And Evie being one of the first athletes, well, most maybe outside of Tia and a couple and Roman, one of those athletes that greatly benefited from the new rules when it comes to basically reestablishing residency. We might see that. I mean, if they keep with this current format and the same rules, we're probably going to see a little bit more familiar names because again, there's quite a few, especially I'm thinking South Americans and Europeans that actually live in the Middle East that train or expats in the Middle East, whether it be Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar. These names it could be more impressive. I mean, this list could be more impressive. Another name I
Yeah.
do want to point out, sorry, Brian, is out of Japan is where is it? Yoko Sakuyama. She's an OG, 37-year old. She goes back to the regional days. She's never made it to the games. She's one of those athletes who, when they were taking national champions, you thought that was going to be her opportunity to finally make it to the games. But of course, that was the year she did not finish. She was second in Japan, but even at 37, she's consistently every year she's the fifth in Japan. She's usually up there in the regions. Again, she's competed in regionals. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in the regional. 2013 she finished fifth in Asia, and then 2018 28th. But it's always cool seeing her. I've always been a big fan of her just because of her story and that she's kind of leading the way for CrossFitters at 37 years old for Japan, and she's an OG.
Yeah, well said. Yuko.
All right, and then I think come down team, only one team's going to get it. I think last year, what was it, two teams? Yeah, two teams. This year, only one team gets an invite out of Asia, and I think it's pretty much set in stone what that team is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have the Kalashnikov team is it's a, it's a familiar team name, but these are some new athletes on their team. Andrei Fedotov finished fifth in the semifinals last year. Kamila Takayeva was, I think, also no, she was sixth, and they're both on that team, joining up with Aijan Zerezova and Alexander Plushkin, who are the kind of the veterans.
Yeah.
And those four have basically been living together for the past month in a small apartment, it looks like, and training. I mean, look, the Kalashnikov team is well represented. Actually, they're people from that
Yeah.
were competing here in Greece. Gave me the shirt. I have some friends over there. I'm hoping to get to the West Siberian Throwdown this year. The process of getting an invite so I can get a visa to go there is in it's happening. It just takes time. But yeah, they're gonna. I think they've been running away with it. They're probably going to run away with it again. I think their team is as good or better than it's ever been. Um, and assuming they make it to the games, I think they do have a chance to have their best ever finish there. You never want to take anything for granted in this sport. They have to go there and execute. They know that. But in addition to being super fit individuals, they do have some team experience. They competed in Saudi Arabia at the Sand Clash we were at, male teams of three, female teams of three. And they've been, like I said, they've been living together, training together. They get along with each other. They're having fun. They have this cool little T-shirt, Ninja Turtles T-shirt that they've been promoting, and people have been supporting them. And they have a big group of people from Russia. That KT team
Mhm.
is wide reaching. That's backing them. So I think that they even in one or two of the workouts they have a chance to put up a good time. It won't stand up against the top teams from Europe and North America, but it could be like a top 10, top 5 performance on one or two of those kind of team work, not the team workouts, not the strength lifting, but um, but yeah, these guys are fit and they should run away with it.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of those teams that actually I always thought they would do better in the games because they're an institution. They're basically like, which is kind of they're kind of like the Russia version of Mayhem.
Well,
Um,
they were. They had,
yeah,
and then when Russia went to war in the Ukraine,
yeah,
a lot of things changed, and a lot of things changed for obviously people there, but also for the athletes. And they were sort of disbanded and kind of
mhm,
separated, and they've been slowly coming back together and reforming. As I mean, obviously there's still ongoing tensions there, but things are a little bit more calm, I would say. Not necessarily acceptable, but calm.
yeah,
Um, but they're getting back to what they were, and it was before that ever happened. We had been saying that this is the mayhem of Russia, where there's is an opportunity for athletes to all gather in one place, and we're talking about masters athletes,
mhm,
individuals, teams,
teams,
all training together and having a supportive community to do that. And we'll see what happens in Russia in general, but I think that it's trending back in that direction, and that we'll see more and more Kalashnikov team representatives in the years to come.
yeah, and they're one of those teams. They get a lot of experience. If you're part of that KT Kalashnikov team, you're doing competitions almost like once a month. It seems like
Yeah,
they get plenty of experience. There's not like a competition in the Middle East or even in Eastern Europe that you don't see someone that's representing Kalashnikov. I mean, you saw it in Athens. I mean, but yeah,
well, and there are yeah, they had three people there. Dmitry Gurin we got a feature of him on Instagram for a lift that he did, but they had a masters 35 to 39 women and a masters male as well.
yeah,
But like Aijan just did an individual competition in Russia like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
mhm,
This is one of the other reasons why PC is going over there while I'm trying to get there this summer, is because there are really cool competitions happening throughout Asia, Russia, China, that people in North America just don't have exposure to. So we're trying to make that happen. It's not easy to make it happen, but we're trying to invest, because just like CrossFit knows, there's a big growing population in some of those parts of the world. There's like 5,000 people in China that participate in an independent season that happens there and culminates in a championship in
mhm,
October. There's over 240 boxes alone in Seoul, South Korea, and there are competitions every month, if not more often, that are happening all over Russia. So these people love CrossFit. They love to compete. They're getting better. They have great communities, and hopefully through what Patrick's doing this weekend and some of the stuff that we're able to do over the next 6 to 12 months, we can continue to get some exposure from them to the other part of the world that we're
Yeah.
from.
Patrick PC, your Korean correspondent. Uh, well, yeah, that's about. I mean, that's it. Like I said, we're going to do this again next Tuesday. We'll go over same format. Go over West Coast Classic as well as what do we have next week? West Coast and Oceania. So maybe
Florida
we
in a
can
row.
we can get our Oceania correspondent on, Bella, to talk about it. So we'll see. She apologized; she hasn't been on, but she's just been really busy. A lot of exciting things going on with Bella, and we're obviously rooting for her. Before we leave, let's let I think we should probably talk about Sarah. Sarah, obviously, she was on Sevon. She made a post this morning. She was on Sevon this morning as well with our coach Justin Kotler, and she had a post and stating why she's withdrawing from the season. And we're not, Brian. I mean, it's a pretty lengthy post, but basically, she's making a decision based on her health, even though that she feels like this is the fittest she's been in a while. Let me go ahead and share this tab. Yeah, so it's time for me to be fully honest about what has been going on the past few years. I've talked about some of the things, such as ACL tear in 2021, finding out 8 months post surgery I no longer have an ACL after my body rejected a graft, and then the ruptured elbow tendon that wrecked my semis last year. Alongside all this, I've felt incredibly off with symptoms of chronic tiredness, dizziness, cramps, joint swelling up, and many other things. For the longest time, I chalked it off as my body's response to overtraining. So basically, what happened is she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called reactive arthritis. And she says the root cause of all this is a failed box jump in May 2020, where I sustained a nasty cut on my shin, which resulted in an infection that carried for a while without knowing it. This sent my immune system to overload, and from there the condition emerged. So it's almost like a staph infection that kind of caused all this.
Yeah, I think that the opening line is probably the most important one. This is something that's been happening for 3.5 to 4 years, and that she has not talked about publicly. Um, you know, it's a real thing that they've been dealing with, and it's unfortunate. This thing that happened within the past few weeks that's prevented her from being able to continue on with the season is it's a bummer, right? Because obviously, despite the fact that she hasn't had the success at the top level of sport the last couple of years, people love her, and they love to support her. And like I said, I made it somewhat of an emotional pick. Not to do it, I thought it was illogical, but the chance for her to qualify for the CrossFit Games again would be one of the great stories in the history of our sport. To go from the heights that she was at to the depths that she's experienced, and then to be able to climb her way back to the pinnacle competition of the year would be really cool. And if that's going to happen, it's got to wait another year now. I know that, I know her, I know Justin, I know her medical team. Like, I trust that they made the right decision, and I hope that it puts her in a position to do what she needs to do to get that opportunity again. Because as cool as we think it would be, it's also something that she really wants, and she still has a passion for. So I hope that she's able to right the ship in terms of that, find a solution to it, and come back stronger and healthier and happier. And if you're a Sarah Sigmundsdottir fan, I wouldn't give up hope, but I would also recommend to go listen to the show with Sevon and Justin, because they give a great perspective on the athlete side, the judges side, the coaches side, and of course, Sevon is one of the best that we've ever seen in terms of just asking questions to kind of allow people to be vulnerable about difficult things. So it's a good listen, and wishing all the best for Sarah.
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten to know her pretty well over the last couple of years, and again, like you said, it's kind of an emotional pick, but I really did think just she made all the steps, and the results from the Open, the quarterfinals, seemed to show that. And on the show, not to ruin too much, but she made this decision, Sunday, Monday, yesterday. She was training to do.
Yeah, I think it's really similar to, Mal O'Brien last year.
Yeah,
Like, it's a hard decision to make.
yeah, and
It's a
she's a fighter.
life-changing,
Yeah,
yeah,
and we know
it's a
how Sarah is.
life-changing decision, and I don't think that these athletes make it lightly.
Yeah, and I think she again. This goes in. I will admit bias in here. Like I said, and I'm sure you'll agree with too. Like Justin Kotler's one of the good guys in CrossFit. He's a guy that he would give the shirt off his back if you're a friend of his, and I would do the same for him. And he makes he everyone knows him as an emotional coach, but he's a logical coach too. He's a very logical. So when it comes to his athletes' health, he that takes a priority. And you know and their success, not just in the sport, but their success far exceeding the sport. And Sarah is one of those athletes who, when she leaves the sport, she's still going to do great things, whether it be for the sport or whatever endeavor whether it's flying private jets, or whatever. She's going to be great at it, but she's going to do it on her. Uh, oh, oh, thanks, Susan. But
Hey, I was so happy to see Matt in Spartanburg
yeah,
at Crescendo, or no, for the Taylor versus the World.
yeah,
Um, I hadn't had much of a chance to interact with him over the past several months, but we had some amazing conversations there. Sevan wouldn't be doing what he's doing without Souza.
mhm,
I remember when Sevan called me up and he said, "Hey, there's this guy. He's gonna do all the stuff I don't want to do, so I can do the stuff that I love to do." And that's I know, look at the impact that that's gone on to have. It's cool that he's got an opportunity there to talk about the stuff that he's passionate about. But it's also, it's been years now that he's invested in that to bring you guys the chance for Sevan to, do all the stuff that he's amazing at.
yeah,
And it's how I feel about you and Chad. Like, teams of people are what make this happen. It's really, really difficult. You have to give like, this is something you absolutely have to give Andrew Hiller credit for. He's a one-man band. Like, he does it
mhm,
all. I couldn't do that. There's things that I love to do. There's things I'm really good at, and there's things that I'm not. And I, have been really fortunate to have you and Chad here because we balance each other out really well. And Souza and Caleb and what they've allowed for to take on those things so that Savan can do that. So Matt Souza is a good dude.
So if you're listening, well, yeah, Souza is a good dude. Like I said, he is. I mean, he gives a perspective that's much needed in the sport, because he gives his perspective as an affiliate owner, and not just an affiliate owner, but an affiliate owner that's involved in so many aspects. What he does for firefighters, and training, and first responders. It's something I think other affiliates should adapt as well. And he gives a great perspective on everything. Yeah, that's it. So you got a flight in the morning. I got a flight in like 2 mornings. Uh, you know, it's crazy. And then we come back. And then we'll meet up Wednesday in L.A. But yeah, again, we thank everyone that showed up today. All great comments. Hope same time next week. Bring that same energy. Bring those same questions. We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you haven't if you're passionate about the North America West or the Oceanic one, you can go look at the article. You can see my picks. They're not going to change unless someone withdraws.
Yeah.
And then come with those questions. Why did you pick this person? Why did you not pick this person?
Mhm.
We're more than happy to talk about that. These semifinal weeks are going to be so fun, so competitive. There's going to be some upsets. There's going to be some tears. It's what makes sports great. And I think that we're in store for a really exciting 3 weeks.
Yeah. Shout out to Carl and HERCBD. As always, not possible without them. Their endless support, of course. Where is it, Brian?
I got it right here. It doesn't leave
Ah,
my side. The
yeah,
relief stick, baby.
yep. Thing
And I've
thing
been
is
using
working.
it.
Yeah.
It's good for travel, and it's good. I mean, standing all day doing those events is tough.
Hmm.
But HGR they've been always by our side. They were supporting me, and now they're supporting us, and we appreciate them immensely.
Yeah. Use friend 20 for 20% off. Hopefully, I think maybe we might see him at West Coast. We'll have to reach out. If that's the case.
Carl said he was going to come out there. I can't remember if he said Saturday or Sunday, but we'll at least see him for one day.
Yeah.
And he also said that there would be something waiting for me at home when I get back from this trip.
Oh, nice. Good for you. But again, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Always appreciate it. And if you're in Lyon or in Busan, please come by, say hi. We appreciate the support, and we'll have a lot of cool content coming out this weekend from different corners of the world. I think it'll be pretty neat. So, especially Friday, because we don't know what type of coverage there is. So, please check back with us, and hopefully, we'll be able to provide you with some answers, some highlights, some interviews with athletes, the best athletes in the world, and get to know some of these athletes a little bit better. So, yeah, tune in and just keep on looking at our socials, subscribe, like, and subscribe, and sign up for alerts. And as always, be friendly, our friend.